Welcome to Inside World Report. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion, a look at the U.S. presidential race with less than 2 weeks to go and the passing of former Lieutenant Governor Lincoln Alexander. Joining me in the studio today, Paul McKeever, leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario, and Dr. George Breckenridge, a political scientist with McMaster University in Hamilton. Well, thank you both so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
We're waiting on something very important to come up, November 6th.
Yes.
Already?
Yes.
Any predictions before we begin?
Ooh, too close to call. You know, the polls are switching as we speak.
Yes, they
and it looks like, depending on whose news source you're reading, that Romney and the Republicans are surging, but it's so close. I think they're within the margin of error at this point in the game. Obama's looking a little bit more aggressive and worried about getting out the troops. Meanwhile, Romney's just trying to look as presidential as possible, and he's getting some kudos for it. So.
Predictions, Dr. Breckenridge?
I think that's right. It is close. It could go either way. At the minute, Obama is leading in enough of the key states, the swing states, to win. But he has to hold on to that, obviously. And it's going to be very intense over the next 2 weeks.
Well, to put in my 2 cents worth, this has always been my prediction before. And I'm not talking wishful thinking here. I've always predicted Romney by a very small margin. But right now, I have to admit, it's up for grabs. We don't know. Now, we're talking about the various elements of the debates. Of course, the final debate that focused on foreign policy. And before we go on and speak to our guests about the various aspects, how the polls are going ahead, we have a report that we want to show you that followed the debate. So take a look.
Hello, Florida! Bang! The final presidential debate was the starting pistol for a 2-week sprint to the finish line. As President Obama fought to hold on to Florida, Mitt Romney tried his luck in Nevada.
And by the way, the math in my plan adds up.
On the campaign plane, Romney's advisors were quick to brush off the president's move to unveil a new 20-page blueprint outlining his agenda for a second term. The Romney campaign has already turned the GOP nominee's debate pivot to the economy.
Governor Romney, wrong and reckless policies?
I've got a policy for the future and an agenda for the future.
Into a new ad.
I'll get us on track to a balanced budget.
A trio of key debate flashpoints laid down the battle lines for 3 crucial swing states. For Jewish voters in Florida, Romney's attack on Mr. Obama's decision not to visit Israel during his first foreign trip as president.
You went to the Middle East and you flew to Egypt and to Saudi Arabia and to Turkey and Iraq. And by the way, you skipped Israel.
If we're going to talk about trips that we've taken,
For factory workers in Ohio, the flare-up over Romney's opposition to the auto bailout.
they would have gone through a liquid.
You're wrong, Mr. President.
No, I am not
You're
wrong. I am not
People
wrong.
can look it up. You're right.
People will look it up.
And for military voters in Virginia, Romney's charged that the size of the Navy is at 1917 levels.
Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military has changed.
It was hardly a direct hit for either candidate. As it turns out, every Marine still undergoes bayonet training. And the fact-checking watchdog PolitiFact rated Romney's attempts to blame the president for the Navy's current fleet levels as pants on fire.
There you have it. The battleground states are fundamental at this stage, but I'd like to hear the two of you give an analysis. I mean, when you looked at that debate, clearly, and this is what you're hearing pretty much across the board, Romney kept taking it back to the economy again and again because, first of all, that's a strong point. Next of all, he didn't want to be seen as a potential warmonger, so he avoided some of the issues with foreign affairs and kept it back to the economy. So I'd like to hear what the two of you, your outline of how you deemed the debate, who you think the winner actually was. I want to start with you on this one, Dr. Breckenridge.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I found the surprising thing about the debate was that Romney backed off a lot of the harder line positions that he had taken on Israel and Iran and on Libya and things like that, and actually agreed with the president on most of the things.
Congratulated him sometimes.
Yeah, it was surprising. He didn't seem to me quite as sure-footed on foreign policy as he was on the earlier debate, particularly the first one. And you're right, he kept trying to, his main argument has always been, his principal argument has always been, the economy is not doing well, I could do better. That's it. And if enough people believe that, an economy is obviously you know, improving, but pretty slowly, pretty slowly. So unemployment is still pretty high. If enough people believe that, then he can win. Unlike you, I think Obama will win narrowly, but it obviously could go either way.
I'm going to ask you this from a strategic point of view, nothing to do with preference here.
Right.
Do you think that strategy worked, or do you think he bent over backwards too much to avoid the image of being perhaps too militant?
Well, he laid himself open to the charge that which has dogged him all along, that he keeps changing his position. You know, it gives the impression that he'll take whatever position he thinks is necessary to take at a particular time. So he has changed his position historically over all kinds of issues, social issues, you know, and the health care principally. You know, he brought the Massachusetts plan into effect and now criticizes Obama for doing the same. So he laid himself open again to that charge, you know, that he keeps changing his position.
Paul?
Well, you know, I don't think that resonates too much with the public. Most of the public doesn't pay attention to changing views, and they regard a change of opinion sometimes as a good thing. New facts lead, you know, more light on the subject. A person might change their mind rationally. My look at the debate, I was tweeting during it, you know, was I think there was a miscalculation on the Obama side of the equation. He had been criticized in earlier debates for not going on the aggressive enough, not being on the offensive enough with Romney. Romney anticipated, I think, that he would be under attack, and they planned a strategy whereby, as you know, the president is baring his teeth and being nasty, Romney can sit back and be presidential, graceful. The other thing was that Obama kept criticizing Romney's platform, which meant that the entire hour and a half was, you know, largely composed, or comprised rather, of a discussion of the Romney plan. So we had a presidential-looking Romney and a discussion about his plan, with nasty remarks being made by the sitting president. I think it lowered him. It was a backfire. Now, of course, that was exactly the assessment. They said that Romney looked presidential. To rescue Obama's bacon somewhat, what did they do? They said, well, he won on points. And that became the talking point. He won on points, which is to say he lost. But, you know, I didn't find a big difference between the first and the third debates for Obama myself. I thought he was stuttering more, he was umming and ahhing more, and he was back to being academic. So I didn't think it was a strong performance. I thought his strongest one was the second. But overall, I thought it was probably a win for Romney. Now, that said, I'm not for either one of them, but I just think that Romney put in the better performance.
I'm going to ask you a similar, yes.
The problem for any challenger is in a foreign policy debate is that he doesn't, by definition, have any foreign policy experience. Obama was in the same situation before. Yeah. And so the challenge for Romney was to look credible. Yeah. And, you know, I think probably he passed that test. The problem, for Obama, he needs to look sort of presidential and look, you know, like he knows what he's doing and defend his policies. And I thought he did that pretty well.
Now George said that he thinks that Romney did pretty well in presenting himself with the foreign affairs. But I'm going to ask you a similar question when it comes to what you thought of Romney's strategy. For example, what we saw in Benghazi with what happened in Libya, that horrible tragedy, with the ambassador being violated the way he was, killed, dragged through the streets, and the other 3 Americans that got killed. This was big, and CNN uncovered emails that showed that while all this was going on, that the Obama administration actually knew about it. Yes. While it was unfolding, there was a communication going on back and forth. This has been a scandal because, after all, it was put to the film before it started to leak more and more and more. Wait a minute here, there's something else involved. Yeah. And some of the criticisms I hear is that Romney did not take advantage of this. He was so busy trying to prove that he's not a warmonger that there were times that perhaps he should have been more on the attack. But Obama was the one on the attack, and he lost that opportunity to shine in areas of foreign affairs. What's your analysis there? Yeah, do you agree with that, or?
Actually, I think it was a tough call. They certainly had Obama, you know, dead to rights on that. Obama was pretending in the second debate that he had at all times characterized this as a planned terrorist attack, and yet 2 weeks of television would prove otherwise, that in fact he was trying to blame the attack on some kind of grassroots response to an American video about a particular religion. Now, that video was horrible, though, in the sense that it was badly made, first of all, but secondly, it was just childish. And so for Romney to come out and take the position any position, I think, on that subject. He would have to have taken a position that would at least be sympathetic to the filmmaker, and that could have been his undoing. So I think he was probably, at the end of the day, wise just to avoid the whole thing. As scandalous as the president's behavior was with respect to the coverage or the accounting for what happened in Benghazi, I still think he just steered clear of what could have been a landmine.
What about the Israel?
I don't think it's scandalous at all. I think what happened in Benghazi is still not entirely clear. And it's not unusual in these situations, exactly what happened. So, but the surprising thing was that the Republicans had been attacking on that. That's certainly true. And Romney chose not to do it. Now, why did he choose not to do it? Maybe because he figured it wasn't, such a good line of argument. Because partly the person he's attacking in many ways in a situation like that is not the president, but Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
Who's the most popular person in America? Hillary Clinton.
Well, at the center of this was it a terrorist attack? Was it pre-planned prior to September 11th? And it was all put down to this little film. Yeah. And I think that is what the scandal is, that it was not this little film. And both sides have actually come out and said, no, it was a terrorist attack. Even the Obama administration came out and said that. But the polls, based on what the two of you are saying, that perhaps Romney's strategy was good, even though there's a temptation to say, well, why didn't he go on the attack? There's something quite unique that showed up in the polls that we're going to be discussing more after, and that is the gender gap. It does weigh in, I think. We'll talk about it after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to Inside World Report. I'm Christine Williams, continuing to talk about the U.S. presidential elections coming up very soon. And the question I posed to our guests had to do with how the third debate went, and was Romney's strategy effective, the way he stayed away from the issue of Benghazi in Libya and didn't want to appear to be too much of a zealot when it came to military intervention overseas. And the two of you agree that his strategy was sound. But here's something that might show why his strategy was sound. The gender gap actually narrowed in for Romney, especially after the third debate. Now, only a month earlier, there was actually a 16-point difference, women preferring Obama over Romney, and that narrowed in down to pretty much even, 47-47. I mean, to me, that was incredible. And whether we could put it down to the strategy in the debate, well, it sure looks like it, because it happened after that debate. Now, interestingly enough, though, which also could give weight to this, is men preferred by a huge margin Romney over Obama, but also after that debate, that gender gap narrowed in. So now things are pretty much up for grabs. No candidate is really way above the others. So right now, the issue is those states, those swing states, those battleground states, as they call them, and what's going to happen. But I'd like to hear, first of all, before we go into that, do you think there's merit to the polls and the gender gap closing in that so many people focused on?
It's difficult to know if it closed in or not. It seemed to in some of the polls, but there's so many polls, it's difficult to know.
But it seemed to be for all of them, yeah.
The Democrats generally have had a gender gap for the last 25 years or so. And Obama was showing quite a big one. And there's no, and particularly among younger women, unmarried women, younger women. And that's a very considerable factor. And the reverse of that was that, men prefer Romney by quite a lot as well. I think that's likely to hold. So that some of the polls in the swing states show that, the gender gap still holding up.
Yes.
I can tell you, as a person who's personally experienced it, I think politicians are very aware of the fact that, especially, this isn't just women, but there tends to be a sentiment that too much change is not too. I think women are more conservative about things. If you propose big changes, they're more likely to be skitterish about it than, say, a wild-eyed McKeever would be. And
you don't come across that way, I guarantee it.
And so, for Romney to come out and say so many times to Obama, I agree, I agree, I agree. It really is just sending the message, no change, nothing to worry about.
And women happy. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they weren't as worried, because when the Democrats are out there saying they're going to bring in big changes, it's going to be horrible, and your life's going to change, that's very scary for some people. And I think women in particular are more conservative about that kind of thing. They want to see more gradual change. They don't mind change, but it has to be. It can't appear wild-eyed. The other thing is that Well, I mean, I don't know what you thought about that, George, but I think that's probably the strategy.
I think it's difficult to generalize about women.
Sure.
It really is.
Yeah, it is, but the polls are certainly
But women
suggesting
generally don't like the appearance of an aggressive man. I'll tell you that.
No, I
they
think
generally don't.
That's probably true, and the risk for both the risk for Obama also is he was criticized for not being aggressive enough in the first debate.
Yep.
But the risk is always that you appear too aggressive, too nasty, if you like.
Right. I'd like to hear what your perspectives will be on the religious issue, believe it or not, because polls were done with religious institutes that conducted them, and what they found is that a large growing demographic in the States now are those that are non-religiously affiliated.
Yes. Yeah.
But it also so happens that, interestingly, that people that are more religious tend to go to the polls.
Yeah.
So what they're finding is this could spell trouble for the Obama campaign, that more religious people are going, and according to their polls, they prefer Romney. So this could translate as well at the polls.
Religion has been one of the principal factors in deciding voting for the last 20 years.
But people don't want to accept that often.
Yeah, but it's true.
It's not considered enough in the mainstream media.
The surveys show that very clearly.
Yes.
The people who are religiously observant, go to church at least once a week, are much more conservative, are much more likely to vote for Republicans than people who don't, or people who go more seldom. The other thing is, as you say, there's been a rise in the people, particularly among younger people, reporting no religion at all, which is a bit surprising in the United States, because it has this long history of being a very, it's been a bit uneven historically, but basically a very religious society.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
think
think some of the evangelical leaders are saying they wonder if they have been too political, if they've attached evangelicalism, particularly that side of the religious spectrum, too closely to right-wing politics.
I don't even know if it's religion per se. I mean, part of that growing population of no religious affiliation, et cetera, some of those people will be either agnostic or atheistic.
Yes.
And some of that, a subset of those people, a large subset of those people will be, morally subjectivist. In other words, they won't be so inclined to be us versus them. They'll be more, well, we're just different and that's that. Well, if your whole mindset is, well, we're just different, it becomes very difficult to get all upset about an election outcome. It's just a different outcome. All governments are the same. Who really cares how it turns out? Whereas if you're if you're steeped in values of some sort, whether they're religious or not, if you have a very strong sense of right and wrong, you're going to be very concerned about some policies, and you're going to be very motivated to vote to make sure that they don't come in, or to make sure that a good policy does come in.
Yes, the abortion issue is big, and that's creating some issues too. But I want to move on to another subject matter, because time is slipping away really fast. I'd love to talk more about this, but there's another one, and that is the passing of Lincoln Alexander. Now, he was the first black MP in this country, and also first black lieutenant governor. This man contributed a lot in terms of the whole issue of race relations, and if you'd read some of the articles that went by, it talked about how difficult it was for him, being a black man, to get to this point. And this is something I know that's very divisive in our country, but it's something that it's there. It's true. There has been genuine racism that's taken place over the years, over the decades, the centuries, if you want to put it that way. And this man broke some serious ground in not just the province, but in the country. He was also the first chair of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, of which I'm affiliated, a little more than affiliated with. And I'd like if the two of you can just give some of your thoughts when you heard about his passing at 90. Wow, talk about longevity.
I think
so. About a couple months ago, so he looked great to me.
Yeah, I heard him on the radio not long ago when he was about to get married for a second time, and he was talking about how interracial, the whole idea of interracial doesn't even mean anything anymore. He was right. And there's a subtle difference here. We can talk about him breaking barriers, although if you think about it, what he really did was he belied a falsehood. In other words, the falsehood was that if you're African Canadian or what have you, you cannot get elected, you cannot be vice regal, you cannot, etc. And with each achievement, it wasn't that he's breaking a barrier, he's doing this with the support of the public.
And let's not forget, there's the Lincoln Alexander Parkway. How many people get that?
So I think each of these achievements demonstrates that society is more inclusive than others would want it to be or would pretend it is.
Excellent point. George?
Well, I think he did break barriers. When I first came to Hamilton just before the 1968 election, and this was in the old West Hamilton seat where I was living. And I wasn't a big Trudeau fan, so I was going to vote NDP. And then I realized...
You, George. Okay,
yes,
keep going. Sorry.
I realized that Lincoln Alexander was the Conservative candidate. I didn't know anything about him. But I realized he was black. And I said to somebody, is he a good guy? And he said, yeah, he is. He's very popular. So I voted for him because I had just come from the civil rights era in the States, in North Carolina.
Wow.
And so I was quite attuned into that, and I really thought it's time we broke these barriers. You know, because there really was a barrier, I think.
But your question about him wasn't, is he black? Your question about him, is he a good guy?
Well, that's right. If he had not been a good guy...
I'm going to stop you both right there. Is he a good guy? That's what we need to see, the person. So he'll be back after this. Don't go away.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Inside World Report. We're into the wrap segment of our program, the short segment where we get to vent. And mine is, come on, don't reject the Alberta pipeline anymore and blow $90 billion on clean energy. Okay, I've got mine out of the way. Go ahead, folks.
I agree with you on that one. Mine is this. There's a sentiment out there that if you want to get rid of Obama, you have to vote Romney and hold your nose because of whatever his social views, perhaps. Well, you know, to my mind, it's not a question of left versus right. It's a question of more government making decisions over your life and I don't think voting one way or another is going to change that. I think the direction is more government power, less decision-making power for the individual.
Okay.
Well, I would link the American election to Link. Link was the ideal person to make the breakthrough and go on from there.
Yes.
One of the alarming things about the American situation now is that you have a real racial polarization in the voting. The Republican Party is overwhelmingly white and attracting, you know, a considerable majority of white voters, whereas Obama has not only the black community, which is understandable, but 70% of the growing Latino community. This is not healthy in the long run. The Republican Party has to broaden its base, and the Democratic Party has to make more of an appeal to working-class white people.
And both of them have to start saying that race doesn't matter and stop pointing the finger at the other guy.
I agree, because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've actually heard it said that it's a good thing to see, finally, a black president.
Of course,
but at the same time, more focus is needed on the quality as opposed to the color of his skin. And this becomes a politicking issue that I find quite disturbing.
I agree.
Right.
And it's used by both sides.
It has to be the right candidate. Link was the right guy, a nice guy, a good guy, a popular guy to make the breakthrough. And Obama, I think, in many ways, a very distinguished, whatever you think of his policies, a very distinguished black man. And that was important in his being able to break that particular barrier once and for all.
I like what you said, though, about Lincoln Alexander, because this is the point I want to close on. You know, we all owe him a congratulations for his contributions and our condolences as well to the family. And on that note, I'd like to thank both of you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you,
You're
Christine.
welcome.
That's all the time we have. See you again next time. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.